Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video where we're going to model an Edison light bulb. Now first things first is what is an Edison light bulb? You've probably seen these if you've ever ventured into a bar, because they're quite frequent in bars and they're quite frequent in cafes and places like that. Basically places that tend more towards the hipster people. Namely, it's light bulbs that give off a very distinct light, so they're primarily used as filler lights. They look something like this. So you can see here, they have quite a interesting look on the inside, especially when they're lit up. And you can see a lot of these wires going across and giving it the distinct look. Also, another thing that you can notice is that on the bottom here they have a bit of a peak, and that is because when these lights are blown they get that distinct look. So let's go ahead and see how we can create something like this, because if you're trying to create any of these labs that I just showed you, it would be a good idea to have something like this done. So as you can see, I already have set up the image as a background. So let's start modeling this thing from the start. The first thing that I'm going to do here is make a logical separation of the elements of this thing. So first I have the casing up here, then I have the actual body of the lamp, and then we have the inner piece. So let's start off first with the upper piece here. So for this I'm going to hold down Control and right click and choose the line. You can also simply go here and from here, from the splines, choose the line. So click here and try to go over the sides. Just so if you have this thing happening, just make sure you enable in render and viewport, you turn those two off. Alright, and just try to match it. You don't have to be very precise. Just try to match it like so, and put it about there. Right click. All right, now I want to do here is snap this thing to this, and from here we're gonna put a lathe modifier on top of this. Make sure you click on the minimum, and this is going to give us a base to start working on. I'm going to press Alt X so it's a see-through, so I can see what's happening here. Awesome. Now, let's just give this thing a bit more details here. So what I want to do is I'm going to select that vertex here with the fillet, round it up a bit like this, round up this thing here, this one over there, this one on top as well, like so. And can probably fix this thing like so. We're just trying to get this thing to a point where it's going to follow the basic shape. All right, once I have this, now the lathe is going to look a bit different, like that. Let me just check it here. All right, awesome. This is going to work. Great. Now, what I want to do here is put an edit poly on top of this thing. I'm going to select this, see if everything is welded. Yes, everything is fine. So select the one on the bottom and delete this one. And now, what I can see is that I have these three peaks here, and generally if it kind of depends on how close the render is going to be for this thing. In most cases this won't even be visible, but for some reason if this is going to be visible, you might want to put in a bit more details into it. But in this case, since it's not going to be really visible, I'm just going to put in three connections like this. Alt X again just to make it see-through. And now I want to extrude this outwards, so the height is going to be till about there. Give it a bit of a width like so. Click OK, and now chamfer this thing one more time, just so we get this rounded edge like so. And I'm going to hold down Control and press Polygon. This is going to select all of these polygons that are adjacent to those edges that we had selected, and simply just nudge it just a tiny bit like so. So rotate it upwards and move it like so. There. By just doing this, we don't have to actually make it so that it kind of follows the whole thing. Like so. Alright, now if I put a turbo smooth on top of this, it's going to give me more or less something that I can use. There we go. Let's check it out. Yeah, I'm actually happy with how this thing looks like. I only want to add just one more edge down here, simply so I can get a bit of a sharper turn there. So let's give it a small chamfer, like so. There you go. Turbo smooth this, and awesome, we have our first part. But actually, come to think of it, it might be a good idea to simply give it a bit of a width here, or a bit of a shell. But since we don't want to add actual shell on it, because this is going to give us a bit more detail that we want, simply hold on Shift, pull it inwards, hold on Shift one more time and pull it upwards on the Z, and this should be more or less enough to fill in anything that might be missing. So once you put on the turbo smooth now, yeah, this is going to look just fine. This is going to be fine. All right, awesome. Next thing that I want to do is let's go and create the inner part here. Now, the inner part is a bit interesting since this thing has a main body and it has holders which actually control the current that goes through the wires. So for the inner part, I'm going to hold on Control and right click and choose line, and do the same thing that we did previously. So try and match this thing to the body, as you can see, all the way down. Well, actually make sure that when you come here, you have something like this, because these are going to be the islands on which you're gonna have these wires come and actually connect to. So now if I put a lathe modifier on top of this, again with the minimum, we get something like this. Now that's fine. I'm actually happy with how this thing looks like so far. What I want to do is put an edit poly and Control Alt X so I can see how this thing looks like. This is fine. The bottom is fine. Now, if I put a turbo smooth on top of this, I'm going to need some edges to help me control this thing. So with the Swift loop, I'm going to put in some edges there, put some edges there and there, and a few more down here. All right, now let's check it out. That is fine. All right, this is actually just fine. So what I want to do here before I go and create anything else is I want to move this thing upwards, and for some reason if I go at this look, I can see in here. So let's quickly just go in and make this thing go like so. All right, awesome. Now this thing is done. What I want to do here is now create the geometry for these holders. For this, I'm going to hold on Control and right click and choose a circle and draw it out like this. All right, from here, I'm going to right click, convert to an editable spline, select with the segment, select the top and delete. And again, hold on Control and right click and choose line. Snap it in here. So click once, hold down Shift so you get a straight line, and click here and deselect. All right, awesome. Select this thing and attach it to the line. Make sure you select now both of the vertices and click on the weld. That is going to make him so this is now all just one line. So what I can do here is I can turn on the enable and render enabling viewport. I can see how this thing looks like. Control the thickness of this thing. I think this is going to be fine. And I'm going to zoom in and put an edit poly on top of this thing. All right, awesome. Select this piece over here and make it planar on, not the X, on the Y, and move it upwards till about there, so we get this type of effect. I'm going to come in here, select both of these, control backspace. And now what I want to do is I want to select this thing, move it inwards till about there. And since this is going to be going all across, I actually want to have a symmetry here. Move the symmetry plane and actually align it to the middle of this thing. So I'm going to either click on the Align button or the Alt-A and make it so it's center to center. All right. So click OK and click on Flip. Awesome. Also, make sure the threshold is low, like that. All right. So with this, what we have here is the first of these wire holders. And since there are 8 of these holders per light, at least in this light, what I want to do here is with the rotate, first I'm going to do is affect the pivot only and center this to the object. So now I'm going to hold down Shift and, well, with the angle snap turned on, rotate this 45 degrees once, 45 degrees one more time, and 45 degrees a third time. All right, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 holders. So I can select all of them and move them into position more in line with this, like so. Hold down Shift and drag it down like so. And at the bottom, what you're going to notice is that they're actually turned upside down. So I'm going to have to rotate this for 180 degrees and now move it into position like so. All right, so with this, we actually have the base for these holders. So now let's make the actual wiring going across this thing. The wiring is a bit different to make because, namely, it is more or less a circle. But if we approach this as a circle and we create it like this, we know that we have 8 pieces here, so we can control this thing or how many of these edges that we have here, or how many of vertices that we have here. If we create this thing, and we can create this, or we can control this with the interpolation. But the problem is that even if I do it like so, and I get it to a point where I actually like it, for example, in this case, if I take a look at the top, well, for now, I'm just going to hide these so they're not in the way. If I take a look at these, we're going to notice that when we get to 3 steps, we basically get one of these vertices on the edge and one in the middle between the edges. So what we want to achieve is basically this, but there is a problem. If we go it this way and we want to modify this, I'm going to right click, convert to an editable spline. Now when I want to move these edges or these vertices, I cannot control them because they are not vertices. Instead, they're controlled by the interpolation. So instead of doing it this way, what we can do to make this thing work for us is simply take the circle, create it into an editable poly, like so, give it a shell. Any shell will work. Put an edit poly on top of this thing, make a connection across this thing, so like so, and from here, create a shape. Make sure it's a linear, so you don't have to actually deal with the smoothness. And once we have that shape, we can delete this thing. So we basically just did the same exact spline, but the only difference is that now, once we press the vertex selection, we can select all of the vertices individually. All right, so now what I want to do here is select all of the vertices that are not adjacent to one of the holders, like so. And from here, move them downwards, like so. Now, here's the thing. If we want to use these things so they look like what we are seeing here, we want to fillet the corners. So with all of those vertices selected, fillet the corners. Doesn't matter that it kind of shrinks it. Don't worry about that. So just make sure it's like this. So now when I enable in render enable in viewport, I can see where these things are going to be. So now I can move them upwards till about there. I can even control the thickness more or less depending on what we need. So move it here like so. Move this thing down like so. And now once we do this, what we want to do is select the bottom holders and rotate them around. Now these are not going to be exactly like so. So I'm going to have to turn off my angle snap and manually just move it in like so. Great. And another thing that's very, very minor detail, but since we're doing it, is the bottom is kind of tapered down a bit. So what we want to do is we want to select all of these vertices here and go ahead and taper them in just a tiny bit. So they're like so, and move them upwards until they get into position. All right, awesome. All right, and isolate, unhide all. And with this, we are actually finished with the inner part. Now here's another thing that I want to note. It's really important if you want to do this thing as a sole model, then make sure you make this piece as well, because this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the actual place where the current comes to. And if you're going to try to get this thing to look as realistic as possible, make sure you just put in that piece or that line as well. Since this is just going to be as an element to any future labs that I might do, I don't actually need that much detail. So I'll hide all, and now the only thing that I have left to do is the casing. So let's go ahead and create that one as well. We'll select everything here, make it gray so it's not colored. All right, so now hold on, control right click and line, and turn off enabling viewport and renderer. Again, right click, line. All right, one there, another there, one more here. Same thing as previously, lathe with a minimum. It doesn't matter, we have this low poly model, because this time let's go ahead and actually deal with this with an edit poly. So with the Swift loop, hold down shift and click. That is going to put in one edge in the middle. That's going to have a set flow applied to it, something like this, and something like so. Select the border, pull it upwards. Awesome. Put a turbo smooth on it. This is going to give us a nice look. Just make sure you select everything, clear all, auto smooth. And the problem here is that we have this huge polygon in the middle, and it's the consistency or the density of all the polygons is not the same. So by adding in just a few more connections or a few more segments, we're gonna get more or less the same consistency or the same density, and we get a nice smooth flow. Also, another thing as I noticed is that you have this bit of a peak here. So easiest way to do this peak is select the bottom here, delete this vertex, hold down shift, scale it inwards till you get it to about so, shift, drag downwards, make it smaller again, shift around to about there. Now I'm going to take this thing here and cap it, or I can simply go and collapse this into one vertex, pull it downwards just a tiny bit, and let's try and give it a few more touches like so. Move it outwards. These are very, very small details, but since we're doing it, let's just do it right. All right, this is going to work. The only thing that I want to change is the last thing is select all of these edges here at the bottom and control backspace. So now we have quads at the bottom, and there we go. All right, awesome. And the only thing that I want to add at the moment is a shell modifier on top of this thing, because if you're going to be rendering this, you don't want to have empty model. Instead, you want to have some thickness added to the glass, because that is going to give you a much different result opposed to you rendering it just as a simple line. So there we go. All right, so with this, we actually have the finished body of our light bulb. And with that, we are finished. So I hope you guys had fun and you managed to learn something new. If you do have any questions, leave them below. I will meet you in the comment section of the video. If you enjoyed the video, then please click the like button. And if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.